Hi everybody, welcome to At Home with LIM, the cooking edition. I am Emma, I am in the education department at the Long Island Museum and I also love to cook. So this is going to be a really fun activity for me to do and hopefully for you to do at home as well. And if you have been to the museum in the past, maybe on the school days trip, you may have seen a little bit of information about Johnny Cakes before you came to the museum or when you were at the museum, but this is going to be a fun way to connect us to the museum while we are not there and to also have something delicious. So let's get started. I like to separate all of my ingredients. So if you looked at the PDF that we put up on the website along with the video, you will see that we have the ingredients listed and the recipe. So I recommend pulling that up and we can get started that way. So you're gonna wanna make sure the staple of the Johnny Cake is cornmeal. So you can get yellow or white cornmeal for this, it doesn't matter. And if you've looked into the history of the Johnny Cake, you'll know that there are a lot of different versions of it. So white or yellow is fine with us. And you're gonna want some sugar, which you should have in your pantry, and salt. So I have put the 2 cups of cornmeal in this big bowl because we're going to be mixing most of the dry ingredients in there. I've put the sugar in this smaller bowl. I'm going to put it there. And then I have my salt in this little bowl right here. So what you're going to want to do first is you're going to want to whisk together these 3 ingredients. So let me move these out of the way. And I have a whisk here. You're gonna want one that's a little bit bigger. I tried to do this with a smaller one and it gets a little messy, and that's also the reason instead of a medium bowl, I'm using a big bowl because when I whisk, it goes all over the place. So add the sugar to the cornmeal and then add the salt. Put all of that aside, get your whisk, and you go for it. So you're gonna wanna do that a few times to make sure that everything is mixed together, all the dry ingredients are good to go. So I feel pretty good about that mixture. I can put my whisk aside for now. And you should have some boiling water ready to go at this point. I like to use a kettle, an electric kettle. If you have one on the stove, make sure that you get that ready to go before we do this. And make sure that you have a parent or a guardian helping you with that. So we are going to be putting 2 cups of boiling water in the mixture. So I like to measure it out first. You can do that before you boil the water, of course, but I'm gonna do it this way. I'm putting it into a measuring cup, and I can see the steam coming up. You might not be able to. So there we go. I have 2 cups. I like to double check my measurements. So you're going to pour this in to your dry mix and then get a good spoon to mix with. I love a good wooden spoon. And you're just gonna mix it together. It's gonna kind of look a little icky at first, but if you know what paste looks like, and I'm sure your parents or your guardian can help make sure that you're at a point with this mixing that it kind of comes together as a paste. The Johnny Cake is quite an interesting thing. I didn't really know a lot about it until I started working at the museum. And there's a really crazy history, and it's not just, we're kind of doing the New England version of a Johnny Cake, but you'll see that there's a connection in the Caribbean, a lot down south. They call them hoe cakes down south, so you might have heard of those before. But this is the New England version, and I think I'm pretty good. You can see that. You can see that it's kind of mixed together and it's pasty. So then you're going to take the milk. I'm using whole milk. I haven't tried it with any other kind of milk, but so I'm gonna do this a little bit. I like to stop after a little bit and just mix it in. I don't want to pour it all in because you might end up not needing all of the milk. I've ended up using a lot of it. I like a thinner consistency for these, but I'm sure there are people that would probably stop now and then make them. There's just, that's the beauty about the Johnny cake, is that you can just kind of make it your own thing. It's a very unique process. And I'm sure that the kids in the 1890s that were going to school and bringing these in their pails for what they would call dinner. So what we call lunch, they would call dinner. I'm sure that every Johnny cake in those pails all looked a little bit different based on what the family did and how Mom liked to make them. So yeah, so I'm still adding my milk. You can see, I'll tip this so you can see it a little bit. It looks a little bit more like that, and it's thinning out. So if you know what mashed potatoes kind of feel like or look like, it's starting to look like that, and that's the consistency that they recommend that you get to. So I still have a little bit under a quarter cup of milk left, so I'm gonna keep pouring it in a little bit. So from what I've read about the Johnny cake, there's a lot of different names, as I was saying. So in the South they call them the hoe cakes, but apparently there's really no knowing exactly where the name Johnny cake comes from, but they say that they could have come from journey cakes. So people that were traveling around, that they would make these as part of their journey, and then the word journey just kind of started to sound like Johnny, so they started calling it Johnny cakes. And then there's a lot of talk about in Native American cultures, like what they called it as well. So if you have time and if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this after you make them, and it really fascinated me personally after I took on this Johnny cake challenge, and it's close to where we live here on Long Island. So in Rhode Island, for example, they have their own history within the state of making Johnny cakes and how they make them and how they're different from even in the smallest state in America, how they make them. Okay, so I've used up all of my milk. It looks like this. So I recommend having a stick of butter. I know we said butter for the pan as much as possible. Depends how much you're making and how kind of flavorful, full of butter you want it to be. Okay, so the butter has kind of come together in my pan. So I'm going to show you, just in case you want to do it this way, you want to be a little bit more precise with what you're doing. This is kind of with the tablespoon measure. This is about what you would get with it. It would look a little bit smaller, and it might take a little bit more time for you to make the Johnny cakes, because it depends how big your skillet is and how much batter you're using. So this can take you a little bit of time if you're making them that small, but I'm kind of doing a heaping tablespoon on my spoon, and I'm just going to, you want to space them apart and not get it on the stove. But they're not really going to spread, which is a nice thing, but you're going to want to be able to flip them. And if they're too close together, then that can be a little bit of a challenge. So when you see that the butter is kind of like pooling together, I like to move the Johnny cake into it, because that really gives it more flavor and it's making it a little bit crispier. So now I'm actually flipping mine, and I like to have these bigger spatulas to really flip with, because then you can get most of the Johnny cake in there. So I'm flipping mine. You can see them there. They're looking really nice. I like to have them a little bit crispier, so I'm gonna let them go for a little bit. I like when they're like a few burnt edges. And in the recipe, it recommends that you let it go about 4 to 6 minutes on each side until they're golden brown. And that's really up to you, but you're obviously not going to want them to be too raw, because the dough is not as good to eat, I promise you, as a nicely cooked Johnny cakes. For me, cooking is very relaxing, and the fact that I get to mix it right now with something historical, something from the museum. It connects me to the museum and to the history, and it's just fun to be able to do that. So I'm starting to smell a little bit of smoke, so I'm gonna add a little bit more butter to these, and I'm gonna lower the heat a little bit. So you can just play around with the heat, as I was saying. It's up to you, like how you sense that it's going. Ooh, now mine are getting golden brown, which I like. I'm liking the look of these. I'm gonna grab a plate. All right. These are looking good. So I was able to make 4 at a time in this pan. So until I decide to do a second batch, I'm gonna turn off the heat and let that kind of chill out a little bit. But let me show you what these look like. Of course, before you eat any of these, you're gonna want them to cool down a little bit, but they are best served warm. So you can see they've got this nice kind of, I like them this way, just kind of really nice there. So let's see. I'm gonna let it cool down a little bit, but I've even enjoyed eating them just on their own. I feel like that's the best way, because there is a nice flavor that they have, especially from the corn. But it's cool to think about the fact that with these ingredients, that people like us in the 1890s were making basically the same thing. And that's one of the best things about coming to the museum and doing a program like going to the one-room schoolhouse, is that you can put yourself in the shoes of the teachers and the kids that lived that life. So while we're kind of stuck at home right now, and just if you get bored or something like that, you can think about what kids in the 1890s were doing on a day home, maybe helping their parents cook, doing something like that. So doing something like this together with your family, with your friends, is such a nice bonding experience. And I think cooking and bringing us together that way is a really wonderful thing. So I hope that before you dig into these, that you are able to tag us on social media. Use the hashtag @HomeWithLIM whenever you post a video or a photo of anything that you are doing related to our lessons. And you can tag us on Instagram at LI Museum, on Facebook at LI Museum, and we're excited to see your creations at this time. And we really miss having everybody at the museum. We miss being there with you and enjoying everything that we're able to offer you. So in the meantime, though, I hope you've enjoyed doing this, and we will hopefully see you very soon. Thanks.